Medellín, Colombia, March 8, mid-1993. Miguel Ángel Rodríguez Orejuela, the co-leader of the Cali Cartel and one of the wealthiest and most powerful drug traffickers in the Western Hemisphere, knelt in a confessional booth at the Iglesia de San Antonio in the Poblado district, believing he was about to receive spiritual guidance from Father Tomás Mendoza, a Jesuit priest who had been serving the parish for 6 months and who had gained Rodríguez's trust through patient cultivation of a pastoral relationship that had begun with casual conversations after Sunday Mass and had evolved into weekly confessional sessions where Rodríguez sought absolution for sins he did not specify, but that weighed heavily on his conscience. What Rodríguez did not know was that Father Tomás Mendoza was not a priest at all, but rather a Central Intelligence Agency operative named Thomas Mitchell, who had undergone 18 months of intensive preparation, including theological training at a Catholic seminary in Virginia, Spanish language immersion to perfect a Colombian accent, and detailed study of Jesuit traditions and practices that would allow him to maintain his cover while operating in one of the most dangerous counter-narcotics environments in the world, and that the confessional booth where Rodríguez now knelt had been modified with concealed recording devices that were transmitting his words to a CIA technical team positioned in a safe house 3 blocks away, recording devices that would capture admissions and operational details that would prove instrumental in dismantling the Cali Cartel's North American distribution networks and in locating Rodríguez himself when the decision was made to move from intelligence collection to direct action. The operation to insert CIA operatives disguised as Catholic priests into Medellin's religious community represented the culmination of years of research and planning by the CIA's Special Activities Division and its Counter-Narcotics Center into methods for penetrating the security apparatus that protected high-value cartel targets, methods that could circumvent the extensive counter-surveillance capabilities and the ruthless violence that had made traditional human intelligence collection against Colombian cartels extraordinarily difficult, and that had resulted in the deaths of multiple CIA assets and Colombian intelligence officers who had attempted to infiltrate cartel organizations through conventional approaches. The research had identified that cartel leaders, despite their involvement in violence and corruption that had destabilized entire regions of Colombia and had contributed to tens of thousands of deaths, often maintained strong Catholic faith traditions and sought spiritual counsel from priests whom they perceived as being outside the temporal conflicts that defined their criminal enterprises and whom they trusted with confidential information they would never share with associates or family members who might be compromised by law enforcement or by rival cartels, creating a unique vulnerability that could be exploited if CIA operatives could successfully assume clerical identities that would withstand scrutiny from cartel security personnel who were trained to detect infiltration attempts and who employed sophisticated counterintelligence measures. Miguel Ángel Rodríguez Orejuela had been born in Maracaibo, Colombia in 1943 and had built his criminal empire alongside his brother Gilberto through a combination of business acumen, strategic violence, and political corruption that had allowed the Cali Cartel to control an estimated 80% of the cocaine entering the United States by the early 1990s, generating annual revenues that exceeded $8 billion and making the Rodríguez brothers wealthier and more powerful than most legitimate corporations operating in Latin America. Unlike Pablo Escobar and the Medellín cartel, which had employed spectacular violence and terrorism that drew international attention and law enforcement pressure, the Cali cartel had developed a more sophisticated approach that emphasized bribery over bullets, political infiltration over confrontation, and business efficiency over theatrical displays of power, approaches that had allowed Miguel Rodríguez to maintain a public profile as a legitimate businessman with investments in pharmacies, radio stations, and soccer teams, while simultaneously managing a global drug trafficking network that coordinated production in Colombia, transportation through Mexico and Central America, and distribution across North American and European markets. The CIA had been tracking Miguel Rodríguez for years through signals intelligence, financial analysis, and human sources within the cartel, but had been unable to develop the kind of close access intelligence that would allow for precise targeting of his operations or for his capture, largely because Rodriguez maintained extraordinary operational security that included rarely communicating via telephone or radio, using multiple layers of intermediaries to insulate himself from direct involvement in trafficking operations, employing former Colombian military intelligence officers as security advisors who implemented counter-surveillance protocols that detected and neutralized most penetration attempts, and limiting his personal interactions to a small circle of trusted associates and family members who had been with him for decades and whose loyalty had been secured through financial benefits and through fear of the consequences of betrayal. The breakthrough that led to the priest infiltration operation came in late 1991 when a Colombian national police colonel, whom the CIA had recruited as a source, provided information that Miguel Rodríguez had been attending Mass regularly at the Iglesia de San Antonio and had developed a relationship with the parish priest, whom he met with privately for confessional sessions, that the colonel believed represented a potential vulnerability because Rodriguez was known to speak candidly with priests about his personal struggles and his desire for spiritual redemption, despite his continued involvement in cartel operations. The information was passed to the CIA's Counter-Narcotics Center in Langley, Virginia, where analysts recognized that if a CIA operative could be inserted into the church as a priest, the operative might be able to gain Rodriguez's trust and collect intelligence that could not be obtained through any other means. Intelligence that might include details about cartel operations, locations of assets and personnel, and patterns of movement that could enable either capture operations conducted by Colombian security forces or, if political authorization could be obtained, direct action by CIA paramilitary teams. The plan that emerged from months of deliberation and risk assessment involved selecting a CIA officer who could plausibly assume a clerical identity, providing that officer with extensive training in Catholic theology and Jesuit practices, creating a backstory that would withstand investigation by cartel security personnel, inserting the officer into the Medellín religious community through channels that would appear legitimate to both church authorities and to cartel surveillance, and maintaining the cover for as long as necessary to gain Rodriguez's trust and to collect actionable intelligence, all while managing the extraordinary risks that included exposure by cartel counterintelligence that would likely result in the operative's torture and execution, potential diplomatic and political fallout if the operation became public and was perceived as CIA manipulation of religious institutions, and theological and ethical concerns about whether using clerical cover for intelligence operations violated principles that should limit how intelligence agencies conducted operations even against legitimate criminal targets. The CIA officer selected for the operation was Thomas Mitchell, a 42-year-old career intelligence officer who had joined the agency in 1975 after completing graduate studies in Latin American history at Georgetown University and who had served multiple tours in Central and South America, conducting human intelligence operations against leftist insurgent groups, drug trafficking organizations, and foreign intelligence services operating in the region. Mitchell had been selected based on several factors that made him uniquely suited for the operation, including his fluent Spanish with dialectical flexibility that allowed him to adopt regional Colombian accents, his Catholic upbringing, and his genuine familiarity with church traditions and liturgy that would allow him to perform clerical functions authentically, his extensive experience in deep cover operations that had demonstrated his ability to maintain false identities under sustained scrutiny, his physical appearance that matched the typical profile of foreign missionary priests serving in Colombia, and his psychological resilience and operational judgment that would be essential for managing the stress and the isolation of maintaining cover while operating in an environment where any mistake could be fatal. Mitchell's preparation for the operation began in January 1992 with his enrollment in an intensive program that had been arranged through confidential channels with Catholic Church authorities who had been briefed on the operation's general objectives without being informed of specific details that might compromise operational security or that might create conflicts between the church's pastoral mission and the intelligence community's security imperatives. The program included 6 months of residence at a Jesuit seminary in rural Virginia, where Mitchell studied Catholic theology, church history, canon law, and pastoral counseling under the supervision of Jesuit instructors who believed they were preparing Mitchell for missionary service in Latin America, a cover story that was maintained throughout his training and that explained his intensive focus on Latin American religious traditions and on the specific challenges of ministering to communities affected by violence and poverty. Mitchell participated in daily mass, learned to conduct confessional sessions according to proper ritual and confidentiality protocols, studied the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola that form the foundation of Jesuit spirituality, and developed the mannerisms and the vocabulary of clerical life that would make his performance convincing to parishioners and to anyone who might investigate his background. Concurrent with his theological training, Mitchell worked with CIA technical specialists and with Colombian experts to develop his cover identity as Father Tomás Mendoza, a Spanish Jesuit missionary who had been assigned to Colombia to work with poor urban communities in Medellín. The identity was constructed with meticulous attention to detail that included creating a complete personal history that placed Mitchell's character as having been born in Salamanca, Spain, in 1950, having entered the Jesuit order in 1968, having served in missionary assignments in Central America during the 1970s and 1980s, and having volunteered for service in Colombia specifically to minister to communities affected by drug violence, a backstory that was supported by forged documents that included Spanish birth certificates, Jesuit ordination records, letters of assignment from Jesuit provincial superiors, and references from priests who had allegedly worked with Father Mendoza during his previous assignments, documents that were created by CIA document specialists using authentic church stationery, and signatures that had been obtained through liaison relationships with Spanish and Central American church officials who cooperated with intelligence agencies on matters related to security threats. The operational plan called for Mitchell to be inserted into Medellín through legitimate Jesuit channels by having Spanish Jesuit authorities, who had been approached through intermediaries and who agreed to cooperate based on representations that Father Mendoza was a genuine priest whose assignment to Colombia served both pastoral and security-related purposes, request that the Colombian Jesuit province accept Father Mendoza for service in Medellín parishes that served communities where drug violence was prevalent. The request was processed through normal Jesuit administrative channels, with Colombian Jesuit officials accepting the assignment without awareness that Father Mendoza was actually a CIA operative, arrangements that ensured Mitchell's insertion would appear completely legitimate to anyone investigating his presence, and that would provide him with institutional support from the Jesuit community that would enhance his credibility with parishioners and with anyone who might question his background. Mitchell arrived in Medellín in September 1992 and was initially assigned to work at a Jesuit social service center in the Comuna 13 district, one of Medellín's poorest neighborhoods, where cartel violence and poverty created humanitarian needs that justified the presence of missionary priests and that allowed Mitchell to establish his clerical credibility by performing genuine pastoral work that included conducting mass, providing counseling to families affected by violence, organizing youth programs, and visiting the sick and imprisoned, activities that were consistent with his cover identity and that created a public record of legitimate priestly service that would support his eventual transfer to the Iglesia de San Antonio, where Miguel Rodríguez attended Mass. The transfer to San Antonio was arranged after 3 months of service in Comuna 13, time during which Mitchell had established himself within the Medellín Jesuit community and had developed relationships with Colombian priests and church officials who regarded him as a dedicated and capable missionary, whose service in a poor district demonstrated his commitment to working with marginalized communities. The transfer was justified on grounds that San Antonio Parish, which served a more affluent neighborhood in El Poblado district, needed additional priests to support expanding pastoral programs, and that Father Mendoza's experience and his language skills, he was presented as being fluent in both Spanish and English, made him well suited for ministry in a parish that included both Colombian parishioners and foreign residents. The transfer was approved by Jesuit provincial authorities without suspicion, and Mitchell took up residence in the parish rectory in December 1992, beginning the phase of the operation that would focus on gaining access to Miguel Rodríguez and collecting intelligence on cartel operations. Mitchell's approach to cultivating Rodríguez was patient and indirect, consistent with how genuine pastoral relationships develop and with the operational tradecraft principle that rushing to establish contact with a target creates suspicion and increases risks of exposure. Mitchell began by conducting himself as a dedicated and spiritually authentic priest who served the San Antonio parish community conscientiously, celebrating Mass with genuine reverence, providing thoughtful homilies that address spiritual and moral themes relevant to parishioners' lives, making himself available for confessional sessions and pastoral counseling, and participating in parish social activities and community outreach programs. Behavior that established his credibility within the parish and that made his presence appear entirely natural and non-threatening to anyone who might be observing on behalf of cartel security. Rodríguez first attended one of Mitchell's masses in early January 1993, arriving with his wife and accompanied by bodyguards who positioned themselves discreetly at the back of the church and who observed the congregation for potential threats. Standard security protocols that Rodríguez employed whenever he appeared in public locations. Mitchell observed Rodríguez's attendance but made no immediate attempt to approach him, instead allowing the relationship to develop organically through the normal course of parish life, an approach that reflected operational patience and understanding that any overt interest in a specific parishioner would be noticed by security personnel and would create suspicion about the priest's motives. The initial contact between Mitchell and Rodríguez occurred after Mass on January 17th, when Rodríguez approached Mitchell in the church courtyard to compliment him on his homily, which had addressed themes of redemption and forgiveness, and had emphasized that God's mercy was available to all who genuinely sought it, regardless of their past actions. Themes that resonated with Rodríguez's apparent desire for spiritual reconciliation despite his continued involvement in cartel operations. Mitchell responded warmly but briefly, thanking Rodríguez for his kind words and expressing appreciation that the message had been meaningful. Conversation that lasted less than 2 minutes, but that established initial rapport, and that demonstrated Mitchell's natural and unpretentious manner that made him appear genuinely focused on pastoral ministry rather than on cultivating relationships with wealthy or influential parishioners. Over the subsequent weeks, Rodríguez continued to attend Mass regularly and engaged Mitchell in brief conversations after services, conversations that gradually became longer and more personal as Rodríguez shared information about his family, his business interests presented as legitimate pharmaceutical enterprises, his concerns about violence in Colombia and its impact on society, and his spiritual struggles with questions about sin, guilt, and the possibility of redemption for people who had made serious moral compromises in their lives. Mitchell responded to these conversations with pastoral care and theological guidance that was genuine and thoughtful, drawing on his seminary training and on his understanding of Catholic moral theology to address Rodríguez's questions in ways that provided spiritual counsel without judgment, and that created the impression of a priest who was concerned primarily with the souls of his parishioners, rather than with their temporal circumstances or their legal status. The turning point in the relationship came in late February when Rodríguez requested to meet with Mitchell privately for confession, a request that indicated a significant level of trust because confessional conversations were protected by the seal of confession that prohibited priests from revealing anything disclosed during the sacrament. And that made the confessional booth one of the few spaces where individuals could speak with absolute confidence that their words would not be betrayed. Mitchell agreed to the request and scheduled a confessional session for February 28th, timing that allowed CIA technical specialists to prepare the confessional booth at San Antonio with concealed recording devices that would capture the conversation while maintaining the appearance of an ordinary church confessional that contained no surveillance equipment. The technical preparation of the confessional booth had been conducted over several nights by a CIA technical team that gained access to the church through Mitchell, who claimed to need access for maintenance and cleaning activities that required him to be in the church after hours. The team installed miniature recording devices in the wooden structure of the confessional booth itself, devices that were concealed within carved decorative elements and that were virtually impossible to detect through visual inspection or through the kind of electronic counter-surveillance equipment that cartel security personnel might employ if they became suspicious about the church environment. The recording devices were configured to transmit encrypted audio to a receiving station in a CIA safe house that had been established in a residential building 3 blocks from the church, a safe house that was staffed by technical officers and Spanish-speaking analysts who would monitor transmissions in real time and would document any intelligence that Rodríguez disclosed during confessional sessions. The first confessional session between Mitchell and Rodríguez occurred on February 28th at 3 Calsart p.m., timing that Rodríguez had selected because it allowed him to visit the church during afternoon hours when few other parishioners would be present and when his security team could more easily control the environment and monitor for potential threats. Rodríguez entered the confessional booth and knelt in the penitent's compartment while Mitchell positioned himself in the priest's compartment on the opposite side of the partition that separated them. Physical arrangement that was traditional for Catholic confessional practice and that created a sense of confidentiality and intimacy that encouraged honest disclosure. Mitchell began the session with the traditional confessional formula, stating in Spanish, "In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, may the Lord be in your heart to help you make a good confession." Words that established the sacramental context and that signaled to Rodríguez that he was in a sacred space where his disclosures would be protected by religious confidentiality. Rodríguez responded with the traditional penitent's opening, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 3 weeks since my last confession." Acknowledgement that indicated he had been confessing regularly to another priest before beginning sessions with Mitchell, and that suggested his spiritual concerns were ongoing rather than being prompted by immediate crisis. The conversation that followed lasted approximately 45 minutes, during which Rodríguez disclosed information that ranged from relatively minor sins involving anger and harsh treatment of employees to more serious admissions about his involvement in activities that caused harm to others. Admissions that he framed in general terms, without explicitly stating that he was engaged in drug trafficking, but that included sufficient detail to confirm his leadership role in criminal enterprises and to provide intelligence value about cartel operations, including references to business arrangements with partners in Mexico and the United States that involved products being moved through distribution channels that required coordination with local representatives in various cities. Terminology that was transparent code for cocaine trafficking operations, but that maintained plausible deniability by avoiding explicit criminal admissions that Rodríguez might fear could somehow be used against him, despite the seal of confession. Mitchell responded to Rodríguez's admissions with pastoral counsel that was theologically appropriate and that demonstrated genuine spiritual care, acknowledging the weight of Rodríguez's moral burdens while emphasizing that God's mercy was available to those who genuinely repented and who made efforts to change their lives and to make amends for harm they had caused, guidance that was consistent with Catholic teaching and that provided Rodríguez with the spiritual comfort he was seeking, while also encouraging him to continue disclosing information in future sessions by creating the impression that the priest understood his struggles and was not shocked or judgmental about his revelations. The audio recording of the session that was transmitted to the CIA safe house was immediately transcribed and analyzed by intelligence analysts who identified multiple references to cartel operations that provided actionable intelligence, including mentions of cocaine shipments being coordinated with Mexican trafficking organizations, discussions of payment arrangements with distribution networks in Miami and New York, references to relationships with Colombian political figures who provided protection from law enforcement, and oblique acknowledgments of violence that had been authorized against rivals and against individuals who had threatened cartel interests. The intelligence was compiled into reports that were transmitted through encrypted channels to CIA headquarters in Langley, where it was integrated with intelligence from other sources to develop a more complete picture of Cali Cartel operations and to identify opportunities for disrupting trafficking networks, and for targeting cartel leadership. Over the weeks following the initial confession, Rodríguez continued to meet with Mitchell for weekly confessional sessions that became progressively more detailed and more revealing as Rodríguez's trust in the priest deepened and as he became more comfortable discussing the moral complexities of his life and the psychological burden of leading an organization that he acknowledged was responsible for significant harm, while also providing employment and economic benefits to thousands of people in Colombia who had few other opportunities for advancement. The sessions followed a pattern where Rodríguez would begin by discussing relatively minor sins and personal struggles before gradually moving to more serious admissions about cartel activities, a pattern that reflected his psychological need to test the priest's reactions and to confirm that his disclosures would not result in judgment or rejection before revealing the most sensitive information that weighed most heavily on his conscience.